In the late 19th century, London was the largest city in the world, a sprawling industrial metropolis divided starkly between opulence and squalor. Nowhere was the contrast more vivid than in the East End, particularly the district of Whitechapel. Here, overcrowded slums, rampant poverty, disease, and crime were everyday realities. It was a place where thousands of desperate people struggled to survive, including many women who, lacking other means of income, turned to casual prostitution. It was in this grim setting that, in the autumn of 1888, a series of murders occurred that would not only terrify the city but also ignite one of the most enduring mysteries in criminal history. The first confirmed victim was Mary Ann Nichols, known as Polly. On the morning of August 31, 1888, her body was discovered in Buck's Row, a quiet, poorly lit street in Whitechapel. Her throat had been slashed deeply twice, and her lower abdomen had been mutilated with a jagged, violent cut. Her intestines were partially exposed, suggesting the killer had some understanding of human anatomy, or at least a gruesome interest in internal organs. Nichols had been seen alive just hours earlier, reportedly drunk and seeking lodging. Her murder was initially assumed to be just another act of violence in a dangerous district, but this view would soon change. A week later, on September 8th, Annie Chapman was found murdered in the backyard of 29 Hanbury Street. Her injuries were even more shocking. Her throat was slashed, and her abdomen was cut open. The killer had removed her uterus with apparent skill and speed, suggesting again that he had anatomical knowledge. Some pathologists believed the organ was removed deliberately and cleanly, implying the use of a sharp knife, possibly a surgical instrument. Witnesses reported seeing Chapman speaking with a man around 5:30 a.m., shortly before her body was discovered. He was described as wearing a dark coat and a deerstalker hat, though no one saw his face clearly. With two murders in quick succession and similarities in method, the police and public began to suspect a serial killer. This fear was soon confirmed. On the night of September 30th, what would later be called the double event took place. First, Elizabeth Stride was found in Dutfield's yard off Burner Street. Her throat was slashed, but there were no abdominal mutilations. Many believe the killer was interrupted, possibly by the approach of another person or a passing cart, and fled before he could complete his ritual. Less than an hour later, Catherine Eddowes was found dead in Mitre Square, within the jurisdiction of the City of London Police. Eddowes had suffered a horrific fate. Her throat was cut, her face was mutilated with deep slashes across her cheeks and eyelids, and her abdomen was torn open. The killer had removed her left kidney and part of her uterus. A piece of her apron, soaked in blood, was found later in Golston Street, near a cryptic message scrawled in chalk on a wall: "The Jews are the men that will not be blamed for nothing." Fearing this would incite anti-Semitic violence, the police erased the message before it could be photographed. These murders paralyzed the city with fear. The press gave the killer a name, Jack the Ripper, based on a letter sent to the Central News Agency, dated September 25 and received on September 27. The letter, written in red ink, was addressed to Dear Boss and signed Jack the Ripper. It mocked the police and promised further murders. Whether the letter was authentic remains debated, but it fueled public hysteria. Soon after, the police received hundreds of letters claiming to be from the killer. One of the most infamous was the From Hell letter, sent with a small box containing half of a human kidney, allegedly from Catherine Eddowes. The letter's author claimed to have fried and eaten the other half. The language was crude and poorly spelled, suggesting it came from someone less literate, unlike the earlier, more polished letters. On November 9th, the final and most brutal murder occurred. Mary Jane Kelly, a 25-year-old prostitute, was found in her small room at 13 Miller's Court, off Dorset Street. She had been killed indoors, giving the murderer privacy and time to mutilate her extensively. Her body was discovered lying on the bed, her face hacked to pieces, throat slashed to the spine, and her abdomen ripped open. Her heart had been removed and was missing. Her breasts were cut off, and her internal organs were arranged around the room in a grotesque display. Flesh from her thighs was found on a bedside table. The crime scene was so horrific that even the most seasoned detectives were sickened. Her murder marked a sudden and violent escalation in the killer's brutality. The police response was vast but ultimately ineffective. Two main forces were involved: the Metropolitan Police, led by Inspector Frederick Aberline, and the City of London Police, who had jurisdiction over the area of one of the murders. Over 2,000 people were interviewed. More than 300 were investigated as suspects, and 80% were detained. Door-to-door inquiries were made, and suspicious individuals were watched or followed. But the lack of forensic science, poor coordination between forces, and limited understanding of criminal psychology made the investigation incredibly difficult. A wide range of suspects emerged, but none could be definitively linked to the crimes. Aaron Kosminski, a Polish-Jewish barber with a history of mental illness, became a primary suspect years after the murders. Some modern researchers claim DNA evidence links him to a shawl found near one of the victims, though this is highly disputed due to poor chain of custody and modern contamination. Another suspect, Montague John Druitt, a barrister and teacher, drowned in the Thames shortly after the last murder. Some officials at the time believed he fit the profile, and his death coinciding with the end of the murders fueled suspicion. Others have pointed to George Chapman, Severin Klosowski, who later murdered 3 women with poison and may have had surgical experience, and Francis Tumblety, a fraudulent American doctor known for his misogynistic views. Over the years, even Prince Albert Victor, Queen Victoria's grandson, has been suggested, although most historians dismiss this as conspiracy theory. The Ripper murders ended as suddenly as they began. No one was ever caught. The case faded from the headlines but remained a subject of fascination for generations. Numerous theories, books, films, and studies have attempted to unmask the killer. Some focus on forensic evidence, others on psychological profiling. None have conclusively solved the mystery. The combination of Victorian fog, brutal violence, and a phantom killer made Jack the Ripper a cultural icon, the archetypal serial killer. Today, the story of Jack the Ripper remains a symbol of mystery and terror. His crimes marked one of the first times the media, law enforcement, and public obsession converged in a modern serial murder investigation. Despite advancements in technology and criminal science, the case endures as a haunting reminder that some truths, no matter how pursued, may remain forever buried in shadow.